Hey everyone, this is Yuri Rashkin, and this is a lecture on beginning and ending the speech. There's a lot of similarities between how we begin our presentations and how we end our presentations. So let's take a look at how we should do both as well as possible. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get attention and interest of our audience. But actually, we need to get attention and interest of our audience every second of our speech, because if the audience is not paying attention, if they're not interested, I might as well speak foreign language and it won't make any difference. Я могу просто перейти на русский язык. Кому какая разница, что я говорю, right? So we do want to get attention or interest of our audience. And how do we do that? We have several choices how we can do that. First of all, we can relate the topic to our audience. And that, to a certain extent, means putting ourselves in their shoes or putting them in our shoes and kind of personalizing that experience that we're going to be sharing with them, in a sense that we talk about ourselves, how perhaps if you're speaking about asthma, you want to say how you woke up one night and you couldn't breathe, and you describe that experience for a while, like, wow, this feels, this relates to the topic. Or you can explain to the audience how this is going to benefit them, which might be even a better idea, because if I'm listening to something that's going to be helpful to me, like for instance, a conversation, a speech on different kinds of coffee drinks, well, this could be useful to you because even if you don't drink coffee, you might be with friends who drink coffee, and then they start throwing words like cappuccino, mocha, and latte, and you don't know what it is. Well, now you will know what those drinks are all about. We're like, wow, I just realized that I could be in a dangerous situation, and this speech is going to save me from this embarrassing experience. So, relate the topic to the audience. Next is state the importance of topic. My concern is just that we do not stop by stating that the topic is important and go beyond that by explaining why and how it is important. This is where words like because are very important, because we want to explain why this topic is important and how this can possibly have an impact on all of us or whoever it is that it's affecting. 3, startle the audience. You can do that by speaking a foreign language, as I just did. You can do that by throwing out a fact that people didn't expect, or you can do it by throwing out an item that people didn't expect. You could take out a hedgehog out of your bag, and we're like, whoa, that was really unexpected. Or you can do like one student did when he was giving a speech about UW Whitewater wheelchair basketball team that has won many championships and trophies, been quite successful. And he began his speech by taking a basketball and throwing it out into the audience. Luckily, there was somebody in the audience who knew the ball was coming, and he was able to catch it, so a tragedy was averted. But that's actually an idea. If you're going to be doing something startling, make sure that somebody else can help you, that you're not totally startling everyone, that you have somebody that can help you if that is necessary. Next, arouse the curiosity of the audience. We can arouse the curiosity of our audience in many different ways. For instance, my favorite word, imagine, because it doesn't create a defensiveness within the audience. It makes people feel like I'm not being told what to do, I'm being told to imagine. This person is not saying you must do the dishes. This person says, imagine if dishes were clean. Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Yes. So it creates this interest and attention without the defensiveness. Very important distinction. Question the audience. Very important here to ask your audience a question that can be answered simply yes or no. If we ask our audience an open-ended question, we need to make sure that we are not on some kind of time limit. Because if you are speaking somewhere where you have 3 minutes to speak, or if you're speaking in the class where you have 4, 5, 6, whatever number of minutes that you have to fit your speech into, if you're going to ask an open-ended question, you could really put your timing in jeopardy. However, if you ask a yes or no question, you might be able to get useful information and also get the attention and interest of your audience. You can find out if your audience knows anything about the topic, or if your audience has some kind of a bigger understanding and interest than just specifically the topic. Maybe you're speaking about a movie that people have never heard of, but if you ask your audience a question about how many of you like movies, oh, okay, people raise hands, so they're engaged, they're interested, and maybe they now feel like this speech is relevant to them because it speaks about something that is part of their own experience. So you can question the audience. An interesting way to ask a question of the audience is to ask audience to stand up or do something physical. Audiences tend to like this because it gets us out of our chair. We're doing something physical. This is participatory, not too much, just a little bit. But you can ask your audience, for instance, to stand up. If they have a smartphone, please stand up. People stand up. Then you say, well, if you have an Android system operating phone, please sit down. And you have 3 people sitting down and everybody else stands because they have Apple operating system devices. And now everybody looks around and they can just see for themselves who has what kind of a phone. So this becomes an educational experience. You definitely get attention and interest of your audience for a few seconds after that. Next, you can begin with a quotation. You can also end with a quotation. And my personal favorite is to end with a quotation simply because a good quote needs a pause at the end where you say, and according to Nelson, as Nelson Mandela said, blah, 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 blah. And I'm saying it not because blah, 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 blah is important, but because the pause afterwards matters. It gives people time to process the information. It's hard to give a good pause for a good quote at the beginning of the speech because the energy is there. We're ready and excited. We're going to do this speech now. But at the end, when we are ending with a quote, we actually have a chance of giving it that pause that a good quote needs and deserves in order to resonate with the audience. Finally, you can tell a story. Telling a story is what many comedians do. You're never going to guess what happened to me on the way here. Oh, okay, so I was at my parents' the other day. See, there's a story that's just is coming out, and you know, because it's immediately grabs our attention. We are such storytelling and story listening beings that if somebody's going to present us with a story, we're going to pay attention no matter if we want to or not. It's a story. Could be interesting. And that's how we get attention and interest of our audience. Congratulations to us, for we have gotten the attention and interest of our audience, but our introduction is far from over. We just did the first thing we had to do in order to get the attention. What do we do with it now? Well, this would be a good time to say a few things. First of all, we need to mention what it is that we're here to talk about, reveal the topic of the speech, as well as preview the body of the speech. There's a good rule of thumb here in public speaking where we want to make sure to mention whatever it is we're speaking about 3 times throughout the speech. And the first time we would do it in the introduction when we introduce our topic to the audience, as we're going to do here. Next, second time is in the body of the speech where we are giving the presentation that we're here to give. And third time is in the conclusion where we, and I know I'm giving away the next slide, but in the end we're going to recap what it is that we spoke about today. So in the introduction, we need to reveal the topic of the speech, and we need to give a little preview that I'll be speaking about, and I'll be covering this, and this today. Okay? Finally, very importantly on this slide is we need to establish credibility and goodwill with our audience. Credibility is, we're going to cover more on, we're going to talk more about credibility later in the video about persuasive speaking, because credibility is extremely important in getting people to believe us and to follow our suggestions, call to action, recommendation, whatever, if they view us as credible. And goodwill is just a way for us to show to our audience that we really do mean well. This information that was perhaps beneficial for us, this is how I managed to lose 57 pounds, and this is how you can lose 57 pounds as well. Or perhaps this is how I gained 50 pounds, and this is how you can gain 50 pounds as well. Goodwill towards the audience. I like to show to my students certain videos which are of comic nature, and they are really helpful, I believe, by demonstrating the opposite of goodwill, which is really just defensiveness, where you have somebody who, you ask them a question, they go, "Why are you attacking me?" That's not goodwill. Goodwill is when we embrace the questions, when we thank people for asking questions, when we share the information that we feel is going to be helpful to the audience. A little bit more about credibility. Remember to give a number. Credibility depends on numbers, and it depends on appearance. So if you're going to tell us that you have always watched this show, you've been biking as long as you can remember, you've always played soccer, it doesn't really tell us anything. So give us a number. How many years have you played? How many games have you been in? How many trophies have you won? How many hours you watched? Anything. We really need a number to help establish your credibility, because that's how we kind of gauge if the person is credible at all, in order for us to invest few minutes of our precious time listening to your presentation. So establish credibility and goodwill right at the beginning, before you even get into the speech, because if we're not trusting you, if we don't feel that you mean well, we're out of here. But you did that. Good job, and now we are ready to go and listen to your whole actual body of your speech, your main points, because you have done the things that are expected of you in the introduction. You got the intention and interest of your audience, you explained your credibility, you explained to audience why they should be interested in the speech, you gave your thesis, and you gave preview of your main points. Congratulations, well done. Now you're ready to proceed with the rest of your speech, or in this case, proceed straight to the conclusion. And let's conclude by speaking about conclusion, right? How fitting. First thing we may want to pay attention to is physical delivery. Does anything change in the speaker, the way the speech is ended? And of course, there could be some changes. So for instance, one of these could be a crescendo. If you're a musician, then this means something to you. If you're not a musician, then you might as well, or maybe if you're Italian, but if you're neither one of those things, crescendo means louder. It does not mean being loud. For that, there's words like forte and fortissimo. Crescendo just means louder. And of course, getting less loud as opposed, getting quieter would be decrescendo or diminuendo. So many exciting words. For now, let's just remember crescendo. And the idea is that we raise our voice when we are about to conclude our speech, because this is a very important moment for all of us. While I do not expect anyone in the class to end your presentation with a crescendo, there are three groups of people who I do expect to be good at this kind of feat, and those would be coaches, pastors, and politicians. Either one of those groups, if you're a coach and you need to get your team fired up, or if you are a politician and you need to get your team fired up, you need to, let's go, and this is the most important election of our lifetime until the next election comes around, at which point it will logically be the most important election of our times, but we need to go and vote, right? Crescendo. So, and finally, of course, pastors, where whether you need people to repent or to put money in the plate on a platter, raising our voice can have an important emotional impact on our audience, and that's what we want, right? So we want to raise that emotion as we're nearing the speech. So that is one option, is to raise our voice. Next option is to reinforce the message and to summarize the message. This is something that I mentioned in the beginning, and I'm going to mention again. We mention things that we speak about 3 times in our speech. We mention it, first of all, in our introduction, then we mention it in the body, and then we mention it in the conclusion. Well, here we are. This is the conclusion. So we should remind people what the speech was about. Sometimes when we start reminding them what the speech was about, they realize that this is conclusion, because that's why you're summarizing. And then they go, oh, I can be ready, even though it doesn't may not look quite this drastic, but in our minds we are gathering ourselves for the end of this presentation. Summary. This may be that moment where you want to use a good quote. Just keep in mind that you really want to make sure that the quote actually fits your speech. Because I've seen examples where a person cited is like, maybe this is a biography of a person, and then the quote is by that person, but it really doesn't seem to connect with anything in the speech. So make sure that the quote you use is not just by the right person for your presentation, but it's also a quote that makes sense in the context of your speech. Give it one bit of thought, but this is a very effective way of ending a presentation, because first of all, you're leaving people with an inspiring thought. Go, Oh, Nelson Mandela really said, wow, that is something to think about. You also are adding credibility to your speech. This is something that we will return to in the future, speaking about persuasive speaking, but it's a concept of reverence. When people have a high level of respect, let's say not for you, because you're just starting out, but Nelson Mandela, and you say, well, Nelson Mandela said, and he agrees with me basically what I'm saying, or I'm saying what Nelson Mandela said. Basically, Nelson Mandela and I were like, it's great. Then we go, well, I don't know, but Nelson Mandela, but I guess that makes your whole speech a little more credible. Okay, so ending with a quote is great. We can end a speech by making a dramatic statement. For that, I refer you to using one of my favorite endings, which is a fact. A fact or a statistic or a number, where you just throw that number out there. 85% of people are afraid of public speaking. 97%, 33%, just give us that. Boom. That's a dramatic statement. Or I want you to know that whether you're thinking about it or not, you are using oxygen right now. Whoa. That was dramatic, especially if you're going to talk about how oxygen is important or how oxygen affects our bodies. And then you want to end with a dramatic statement. This is a good ending. You have my permission to end it with a dramatic statement. Say something that will make us think. Finally, refer to the introduction. If you can come up with some way to connect the end of your speech to the beginning, it will not only remind us that we are resetting and that this is summarizing your speech, but now you're going back to the beginning and remind us where we started. And it kind of makes us think of the whole speech once again. That can be very effective, and it also makes the audience feel rewarded for paying attention. And that's about it when it comes to beginning and ending the speech. There's a few things that we need to do for an effective introduction. There are a few things we should do for an effective ending.